Oh, there we go. Okay. And I was just reading through this, which is one of the, let me see, the newer subnets. Let's see. This is from Tao Times. Tool that leverages Tao360, an AI-powered analysis tool that leverages multiple AI models to evaluate Bittensor subnets and analyzing over 4,000 reports from GitHub, Discord, and social media emissions. This inaugural research introduces the methodology for helping validators, delegators make informed decisions about subnet weight based on the comprehensive data. So I went through and I was taking a look at this, because I'm very bullish on Bittensor. And in this paper, they were using traditional models like these ones here to try to decide on the allocation for emissions for miners or for subnets. And I read through this and had a couple things that I wanted to point out in here, and then I wrote down some notes here that I wanted to mention. So if you're not familiar with how the miners, like from my understanding, and I'm not an expert in this, I'm just continuing to learn this, but so the miners can go to any subnet they want to do the actual work of the subnet, where validators can also do the same thing, but they can be biased. So as I'm reading through this, I'm like getting a better understanding of this, and then I'm like, I don't think this is going to actually work, to kind of give away the answer. But like, if you understand that Bittensor is creating this decentralized AI that's going to be so much better than everything else that's going to be centralized and closed, then why would you use these models that are from closed source centralized places like Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or Sonnet, right? All these are closed AI models that where OpenAI or like Bittensor is actually open. And so they're basically taking data from different sources. I think I highlighted it here. From GitHub repository, from commit history. So like when you take code and you commit it, I think is how it works on GitHub. Something else related to code here, a database. They also pulled data from Twitter directly and Discord analysis. So they pulled a bunch of different data together to feed it into these models, right? And they pull all the data together, they feed into these models, they all spit out their kind of ranking for the subnets, because the validators are going to validate the work of the miners, and they're going to basically stack rank them and come to a consensus and of how emissions are output into the network or into the subnets or the miners, I'm sorry. And there's a bias there. So what they found in this paper was that by using these closed loop, AI systems, is that there's a bias towards a couple specific subnets, which I thought I was like, that's interesting, which then got me actually to dive in a little bit deeper to try to like understand what is going on. Let me see here where I found that. Oh, here it is. Okay, so the validators are ranking these, and subnet 19 and subnet 4 are overvalued with how much emissions in Tau they're actually getting. So it is what they found in here. And when I was doing more research on this, validators will validate across the whole network, and miners will or can participate in any subnet they want to do the work, right? So like validators are going to work across the network, miners are going to work across the network. However, they're going to have biases because they're humans. And so some of the things that I think I was trying to learn more about that came up with this list is validators are going to probably have a bias when it comes to hardware, where if their subnet or the miners are using some obscure hardware, they're not going to want to deal with that because they, as a validator, there's subjectivity to this ranking. And so when you're going through and if you don't understand how something works, somebody's hardware, then you're not going to do that. Also, if your expertise is in one area of a subnet and not in another area of a subnet, then you're not going to focus on the other ones because your expertise is in this area. So it's going to create a bias in validators to rank subnets based upon like the ease at which they can understand the outputs from the miners, as well as the compatibility with their hardware the validator is using relative to the subnet and or the miners, if I'm understanding this correctly. Then you look at the miner side of things. So miners can operate across any subnet, but they're also going to have a bias towards the subnet that has the highest emissions. So if you're going to go work somewhere and you can work at, any subnet you want to work at, you're probably going to work at the one where you're going to get paid the most money, right? Because a lot of people are very focused on money. So the miners are going to go to these subnets where they can get the most emissions. And when you have a clear bias, according to their research, it looks like there's a clear bias between subnet 19 and subnet 4, where I'm trying to explain that this actually just could be created because they're using more well-known hardware and or the outputs from the miners is more readily available or easier to understand, or like there's bigger mind share for that type of data versus some other obscure, less known, more abstract data or output that's coming out of the system, which then creates more miners going into those subnets. Also on the miners' biases. So like miners are going to be biased to where they can make the most money, but also where their model could be potentially the most effective. But this is probably going to be secondary, right? Because if you're like, hey, you can make more money here, but your model is going to be more effective over here, but you make half as much money, most people are just going to pick the first option, even if it's less effective on the entirety of the network. The same thing goes with their hardware. If their hardware is not necessarily as compatible, they're not going to choose that subnet. So if you choose certain hardware that is broadly used, you would think that you'd have a higher probability that more miners are going to actually come to your subnet than otherwise, because you selected hardware that is more ubiquitous across the world. The same thing would go with outputs from the miner. So if it's structured in a certain way where the data comes out and it's more easily understood, like I'm grasping and understanding this whole entire thing. So when you see this, where subnet 19 and subnet 4 are getting a disproportionate amount of emissions, they're saying this is overweight in this category of stack ranking, right? Because the validators are stack ranking the subnets, and then they're getting emissions, and it is across the board. So they're trying to actually solve this. The other thing that I noticed, let's see if I have any other notes on here, is which I mentioned at the beginning. If you're using these, right, these are all closed loop. So like, if you believe or like understand that, a decentralized AI is a better solution in the long run, then like why would you use these? Because the output's going to be worse than something that's going to be coming from the actual network there. So in the long term, I don't think Tao360, which is like the subnet, is actually going to continue using these models. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me, which, I think this is just them starting out. So that'll be a start. I also had, this just came out, and I wanted to review this here quickly and get back into actually making some content, but improving the quality of those time. So this is Tao Times .xyz. Interesting, because then they help tabulate some of the things that are going on in the network. In 2024, the Neural IPS conference, one of AI's most prestigious gatherings with over 12,000 attendees, convened in Vancouver, featuring prominent figures, including this guy here, which is probably somebody in the network. We can take a look here. Just Canadian Russian computer scientist specialized in machine learning. If we look at his X profile, oh, I guess I can't go there because I blocked that. So let's go back over here. But basically, he was there. Joseph Jacks announced his Bittensor company, Latents Holdings, planning to operate a validator and contribute to launch of new subnets. They said plural there. The company starting with $3 million in initial investments. The other thing too, when you're thinking about like when I think about Bittensor, if people are raising money from like legacy players, like legacy finance, to start subnets, then like to me that's a good sign, because people in legacy finance generally don't understand like decentralization or crypto. So if you have more subnets coming on that are financed through legacy finance, the capital markets, I think that's a good thing for the space as a whole. What else was on here was interesting. This is what we just went through. I thought it would be more interesting when I initially picked it to like read about. NASA launched Subnet 59 agent arena, incentivizing and ranking AI agents based on their social performance metrics like mindshare, impressions, and community engagement. This would be interesting to maybe read more about. I'd like to do one of these videos, say, once a week or something. The subnet includes bonus incentives for integrating with subnet 42 data scraping capabilities and building token communities. I would bet over the next, 3 to 9 months, we're going to see so many more of the subnets working with other subnets like this and incentivizing them to actually work with other subnets. The subnet aims to formalize the existing competition between AI agents while encouraging integration with Bittensor's broad subnet ecosystem. We just talked to blah, blah, blah on the show. Okay, this also kind of covers, I think, part of what the reasoning behind the part of, if you've been on Twitter and you're looking at the Bittensor feed on there, well, over the last, like, say, month and a half, there's been a lot of people complaining about validators weight copying, which I don't fully understand, but I think it's a validator will stack rank something and then somebody else will just copy theirs because validators are going to earn emissions. Let me see here. I think I have this here somewhere in my notes. Validators are going to earn, where is it? Validators are responsible for ensuring the integrity, accuracy, and trustworthiness of the network by evaluating and approving the work done by the miners. They assess the outputs of the miners, such as the quality of computational tasks, and assign weights or scores to miners' contributions. Right? So if you're just copying somebody else's, then validators are actually rewarded. So validators earn rewards in the form of the emissions for Tao for their role in verifying and scoring miners' work. Their emissions are allocated based on the validation accuracy, the reliability of the assessments compared to the network consensus. So if I can just copy somebody else's work, then I don't have to do the work that they're actually doing, but I get to my weighting is actually reliable because I'm just copying somebody else's. So I can earn a higher emission as a validator. Engagement, the volume of work they validate and consistent. So this is part of how they earn the rewards, the validators. Engagement, the volume of work they validate and the consistency of the participation. Validators also receive state-based incentives, meaning this part I don't fully understand here. So validators receive state-based incentives, meaning they earn a portion of their rewards based on how much of their native token Tao they have staked, incentivizing good behavior and long-term commitment to the network. Because when they earn, they maybe take part of those rewards. Is that where the fees come from potentially? I'm not exactly sure. But this on the screen here is probably going to actually help solve that completely. So this is I think it's like Bittensor Foundation Network or something, announced the deployment of Commit Reveal v3 to mainnet soon. Commit v3 is an encryption mechanism which will prevent validators from copying other validators' weights by hiding consensus data until it becomes obsolete for copying purposes. The deployment of Commit Reveal v3 represents a pivotal milestone for Bittensor by addressing the weight copying. So like this is what everybody's been complaining about on Twitter for the last couple weeks. Tudo from Menta Minds released a detailed analysis on weight copying, arguing that while it possesses significant challenges to validators' incentives, as we were just talking about, and network consensus, the solution should come through technical improvements rather than subjective governance, similar to how Bitcoin overcame its early challenges. I think I'm not sure if they're just saying if this is considered governance or if this is considered technical improvements. I don't exactly know. Taobot has announced, so this is the other thing I wanted to look into. Maybe I can do this one next week and do more research and be better prepared. But Taobot has announced Swap, an upcoming platform that will enable trading between ETH and subnet tokens as part of the Tao ecosystem launch, aiming to amplify access to Bittensor assets. This, I'm very excited about. This will be really cool. Let's see here. Ultimate Bittensor solution. This is their site. So I got to read through their documentation to get a better understanding of this. A bunch of shit in here. I got to read through this stuff. But there was very short video, and the quality of these should improve as I do more of them. But I wanted to get back on here and just make something. I don't know how to see if there's any comments on here. Trying to log into my account to see if I can see it because I don't see them on here. But if you have any comments, leave them down below. I'll check the comments on YouTube and I'll touch on them in another video. Thank you. Peace.